The rain was falling hard on the streets of Chicago that Tuesday evening. Myra walked fast with her umbrella broken and her shoes wet. She was late for her shift at the Grand Palace Hotel, and her manager did not like it when workers came late. She was 23 years old, and this was her life now. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, do it all again. Myra worked at the front desk of the hotel. She checked guests in and out. She answered phones. She smiled even when she was tired. She said "have a nice day" 100 times until the words lost all meaning. It was not a bad job. It paid the rent for her small apartment. It put food on her table. But every night when she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, she felt something empty inside her chest, like a song that had stopped in the middle. She had not always felt this way. When Myra was a little girl in Lagos, Nigeria, her grandmother used to sit her on a wooden stool in front of an old piano. The piano was brown and scratched. Some of the keys made no sound at all, but to Myra it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Her grandmother would take her small hands and place them on the keys. "Feel the music," her grandmother would say. "Do not just play it, feel it in your bones." Myra learned to play on that old piano. She was not taught by any teacher. Her grandmother showed her the basics, and then Myra taught herself. She would sit for hours playing the same songs again and again until her fingers knew them by heart. The neighbors would stop outside the window to listen. "That child has a gift," they would say, and Myra believed them. But gifts do not pay for plane tickets. Gifts do not pay for visas. When Myra was 17, her father got a job in America. The whole family moved to Chicago. They left everything behind: the house, the neighbors, the old piano. Myra cried the whole flight. She pressed her face to the airplane window and watched Africa disappear below the clouds. In Chicago, there was no piano. There was no time for music. Her father worked long hours at a factory. Her mother cleaned houses for rich families. Myra went to school during the day and worked at a grocery store at night. Music became a memory, a beautiful, painful memory that she tried not to think about. Then her father got sick. It happened fast. One day he was tired. The next day he could not get out of bed. The doctors said it was his heart. 3 months later he was gone. Myra was 19 years old when she stood at his grave and said goodbye. Her mother went back to Nigeria after that. She could not stay in America anymore. Too many sad memories. But Myra stayed. She did not know why. Maybe she was hopping for something. Maybe she was waiting for a sign. 4 years passed. Myra got the job at the Grand Palace Hotel. She moved into a tiny apartment on the south side of the city. She stopped thinking about music. She stopped thinking about the future. She just lived, one day at a time, like a person walking through fog. That rainy Tuesday, Myra arrived at the hotel 10 minutes late. Her manager gave her a hard look but said nothing. She took her place behind the front desk and started her shift. The hours passed slowly. Check-in, check-out, phone calls, complaints about room service. The same thing over and over. During her break, Myra walked to the small room where the employees kept their things. There was a bulletin board on the wall covered with old flyers and notices. Most of them were about things that did not matter: a lost dog, a car for sale, a church event from 3 months ago. But that night something caught her eye. It was a new flyer. The paper was bright yellow and the words were printed in big black letters. "Conservatory open auditions," it said. "1 full scholarship available. All ages welcome. No professional training required." Myra stopped walking. She read the flyer again and again. The conservatory was one of the best music schools in the country. She had heard of it before. Famous pianists had studied there. It was the kind of place that poor girls from Lagos did not go to, the kind of place that existed in a different world. But the flyer said something else. It said that the audition was simple: play 1 piece, any piece, 5 minutes maximum. They were not looking for perfect technique. They were looking for potential, for something raw and real, something that could be shaped into greatness. "Show us what you have inside," the flyer said at the bottom. "We will do the rest." Myra's hands were shaking. She did not know why. It had been 6 years since she touched a piano, 6 years since she played a single note. Her fingers had forgotten the songs. Her heart had forgotten the feeling. She was not a musician anymore. She was a hotel worker with wet shoes and a broken umbrella. But something was happening inside her chest. That empty space was filling up with something warm. It was fear, yes, but it was also something else, something that felt like hope. She looked at the date on the flyer. The audition was in 8 weeks. 8 weeks to learn a piece. 8 weeks to remember how to play. It was not enough time. It was impossible. She would make a fool of herself. The judges would laugh at her. She would waste their time and her own. Myra reached up and touched the flyer with her fingertips. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the old brown piano with the broken keys. She thought about the neighbors who stopped outside the window to listen. "That child has a gift," they used to say. Did she still have it? Was it still inside her, buried under all those years of work and grief and survival? Or had it died along with her father, along with her old life, along with everything she used to be? There was only one way to find out. Before she could change her mind, Myra pulled out her phone and typed in the website from the flyer. The registration form was simple: name, age, contact information, a small box that asked, "What instrument do you play?" Myra typed one word: piano. Her finger hovered over the submit button. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. This was crazy. This was stupid. This was the most reckless thing she had ever done in her life. She pressed the button. For a long moment she just stood there staring at the screen. A message appeared. "Thank you for registering. We look forward to hearing you play." Myra laughed. It was a strange sound, something between joy and terror. She put her phone back in her pocket and walked back to the front desk. Her shift was not over yet. There were still guests to check in, phones to answer, smiles to fake. But something was different now. Something had changed. For the first time in 6 years, Myra had something to look forward to. She had a date on the calendar. She had a reason to hope. She did not have a piano. She did not have money for lessons. She did not have anything except a registration confirmation and a dream that refused to die. But she had 8 weeks, and she was going to use every single one of them. When her shift ended that night, Myra walked out into the rain. The water fell on her face and mixed with tears. She did not know she was crying. She looked up at the dark sky and whispered a prayer. To God, to her father, to her grandmother, to anyone who might be listening. "Help me," she said. "Please help me do this." The rain gave no answer, but somewhere deep inside Myra felt something stir, a small flame, a tiny spark, the beginning of something that could not be stopped. She was going to play again, no matter what it took. The first problem was obvious. Myra did not have a piano. A real piano cost thousands of dollars. Even a used one was far beyond what she could afford. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her electricity bill was sitting on her kitchen table, unpaid. She had exactly $412 in her bank account, and that money had to last until her next paycheck. But Myra was not a person who gave up easily. She had survived too much to let a small thing like money stop her. The day after she registered for the audition, she started looking for solutions. First, she tried the obvious places. There was a community center 3 blocks from her apartment. She walked there on her day off and asked if they had a piano she could use. The woman behind the desk shook her head. "We had one," she said, "but it broke 2 years ago. No money to fix it." Next, Myra tried the churches. There were 4 churches within walking distance of her home. She visited each one and explained her situation. The pastors were kind. They listened to her story, but the answer was always the same. "Our piano is only for Sunday services. We cannot let strangers use our instruments. Perhaps you could try somewhere else." Myra did not get angry. She did not get sad. She just kept looking. On Saturday morning, she took the bus to a part of the city she had never visited before. It was an old neighborhood with narrow streets and small shops. There were pawn shops on every corner, places where people sold their things when they needed money fast. Myra walked into one of them and looked around. The shop was crowded with objects, old televisions, broken lamps, dusty paintings, and in the corner, pushed against the wall like something forgotten, there was a keyboard, not a piano. A small electronic keyboard with black and white keys and a wire hanging from the back. Myra walked over to it. The keyboard was old. The brand name on the front was scratched and hard to read. Some of the keys were yellow with age, but when she pressed one of them, a sound came out. Thin and weak, but still a sound. "How much?" she asked the man behind the counter. He looked at the keyboard like he had forgotten it was there. "That old thing, $40. $40. Myra could afford that. It would mean eating rice and beans for the next 2 weeks, but she could afford it. "Does it work?" she asked. The man shrugged. "Some of the keys stick, but it makes noise. That's all I can tell you." Myra did not think twice. She paid the money and carried the keyboard out of the shop. It was heavier than it looked. She had to stop twice on the way to the bus stop to rest her arms. People on the street looked at her strangely. A young black woman carrying an old keyboard down the sidewalk. She must have looked crazy. She did not care. She had an instrument. That was all that mattered. When Myra got home, she set up the keyboard on her small kitchen table. She plugged it in and pressed the power button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit up with a faint green glow. The keyboard was alive. She sat down on a wooden chair and placed her hands on the keys. They felt strange under her fingers, hard and plastic, nothing like the smooth ivory of a real piano. When she pressed a key, the sound was thin and electronic. It did not fill the room the way a piano did. It did not touch her heart. But it was something. It was a start. Myra closed her eyes and tried to remember. Her fingers searched for a song, any song, something from long ago. For a moment there was only silence. Her mind was blank. 6 years was a long time, maybe too long. Then slowly something came back, a melody, simple and soft. A lullaby her grandmother used to play on the old brown piano in Lagos. Myra's fingers began to move. They were clumsy at first. They hit wrong notes. They stumbled over each other. But the melody was there, buried deep in her memory, waiting to be found. She played the lullaby 3 times, then 4 times, then 10 times. Each time it got a little better, a little smoother. The wrong notes became fewer. The music began to flow. When Myra opened her eyes, 2 hours had passed. Her back was aching from sitting on the hard chair. Her fingers were sore from pressing the stiff keys. But she was smiling. For the first time in years, she was truly smiling. The next day, she went to the public library. She did not have money for sheet music, but she knew that libraries had books. Maybe they had music books too. The librarian was a kind old woman with gray hair and glasses. When Myra explained what she was looking for, the woman's face lit up. "We have a whole section," she said. "Not many people ask for it anymore. Come, I will show you." The music section was small and dusty, hidden in a corner of the library that most people never visited. But to Myra, it was a treasure chest. There were books of classical music. And Chopin, beautiful, heartbreaking Chopin. Myra pulled out a book of Chopin's nocturnes. She opened it and looked at the notes on the page. They were like a secret language, a language she had once known but had almost forgotten. She borrowed 3 books that day and carried them home like precious gifts. That night after her shift at the hotel, Myra began to practice for real. She set up the sheet music on the kitchen table. She plugged headphones into the keyboard so she would not wake her neighbors. And she played. The first night was hard. Her fingers did not move the way she wanted them to. The notes on the page seemed impossible. She made so many mistakes that she wanted to throw the keyboard out the window. But she did not stop. She played the same measure again and again, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, until her fingers learned it by heart. The second night was a little easier. The third night easier still. Soon, Myra developed a routine. She worked at the hotel from 3 in the afternoon until 11 at night. When she got home, she ate a quick dinner, rice and beans, or sometimes just bread and water. Then she sat down at the keyboard and practiced until 3 or 4 in the morning. She slept only a few hours each night. She was always tired. Her eyes had dark circles under them. Her asked if she was sick. She just smiled and said she was fine. The keyboard was a poor substitute for a real piano. The keys stuck. The sound was flat and lifeless. Some notes did not work at all, but Myra played it like it was a grand piano in a concert hall. She gave it everything she had. Her fingers started to bleed after the first week. The hard plastic keys were rough on her skin. Small cuts opened on her fingertips. She wrapped them in bandages and kept playing. The pain did not matter. Nothing mattered except the music. Late at night, alone in her tiny apartment, something magical began to happen. The notes started to connect. The melody started to breathe. Myra could feel the music moving through her, just like it had when she was a little girl in Lagos. It was coming back. The gift was still there. One night around 2 in the morning, Myra finished playing a Chopin nocturne all the way through. No mistakes, no stumbles, just pure, flowing music. She sat in the silence that followed and felt tears running down her face. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying because she had found something she thought was lost forever, a part of herself that she had buried and forgotten, a part that was now waking up, stretching, coming back to life. The audition was still 6 weeks away. She had so much more to learn, so much more to practice. The road ahead was long and hard. But for the first time, Myra believed she could walk it. For the first time, she believed she had a chance. She wiped her tears and placed her hands on the keyboard again. There was no time to rest, no time to celebrate. Every minute mattered. She took a deep breath and began to play. 3 weeks had passed since Myra bought the old keyboard. 3 weeks of practicing until her fingers bled. 3 weeks of sleeping only a few hours each night. 3 weeks of living on rice and beans because she could not afford anything else. She was getting better. She could feel it in her hands, in the way her fingers moved across the keys. The music was starting to sound like music again. But the closer the audition got, the more a dark voice whispered in her head. A voice that told her she was wasting her time. A voice that told her she would never be good enough. It was a Sunday afternoon when her phone rang. Myra was sitting at the keyboard, practicing a difficult passage for the 100th time. She looked at the screen and saw her mother's name. She had not spoken to her mother in 3 weeks. They usually talked every Sunday, but Myra had been so busy with practice that she forgot to call. She answered the phone with guilt in her heart. "Mama, I am sorry I did not call." Her mother's voice was warm and tired. "It is okay, my daughter. I know you are busy with work. How are you? Are you eating well? Are you taking care of yourself?" Myra looked around her small apartment. The keyboard sat on the kitchen table. Sheet music was scattered everywhere. Empty rice containers filled the trash can. She had lost weight. Her clothes hung loose on her body. She was not taking care of herself at all. "I am fine, Mama," she lied. "Everything is fine." They talked for a while about small things, the weather in Lagos, the health of Myra's aunts and uncles, the price of food at the market, normal things, safe things. But Myra could not keep her secret forever. The words came out before she could stop them. "Mama, I am going to audition for a music scholarship." There was silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence that made Myra's stomach twist. "What do you mean?" her mother finally asked. "What scholarship? What music?" Myra explained everything. The flyer at the hotel, the conservatory, the open audition in 5 weeks, the old keyboard she bought from the pawn shop, the late nights of practice. She talked fast, the words pouring out like water from a broken tap. She wanted her mother to understand. She needed her mother to believe in her. When she finished, there was another long silence. "Myra," her mother said slowly, "you are not a child anymore." "I know, Mama." "You have a job, a real job. It pays your rent. It puts food on your table. Why would you risk that for a dream?" Myra felt something cold settle in her chest. "It is not just a dream, Mama. It is a real chance to do something with my life." Her mother sighed. It was a sound Myra knew well, a sound that meant disappointment. "My daughter, I have watched you struggle for years. I have seen you work so hard just to survive, and now you want to throw it all away for music, for something that will never pay your bills." "The scholarship is free," Myra said. "If I win, I do not have to pay anything. I can study music for a whole year." "And then what? After the year is finished, then what? You will be a musician. You will play piano for money." Her mother laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Myra, be realistic. People like us do not become musicians. We work. We survive. That is what we do." The words hit Myra like a slap. She gripped the phone, trying to control the anger rising in her throat. Grandma was a musician. She played piano her whole life. "And she died poor," her mother said sharply. "She died in a small house with a broken piano and nothing in her bank account. Is that what you want for yourself?" Myra did not answer. She could not answer. The tears were coming, and she did not want her mother to hear her cry. "I am not saying this to hurt you," her mother continued, her voice softer now. "I am saying this because I love you. I want you to be safe. I want you to have a good life. These dreams, they are beautiful, but they are dangerous. They make you forget what is real." "Music is real," Myra whispered. "It is the most real thing I have ever felt." Her mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was tired. "You are grown now. You will do what you want to do, but do not say I did not warn you. Do not blame me when this dream breaks your heart." They said goodbye shortly after that. Myra hung up the phone and sat in the silence of her apartment. The keyboard was in front of her, waiting. The sheet music was open to a page she had practiced 1,000 times. But suddenly, she did not want to play. She did not want to do anything. Her mother's words echoed in her head. "People like us do not become musicians. We work, we survive. That is what we do." Was it true? Was she fooling herself? Was this whole thing just a stupid fantasy that would end in disappointment? Myra stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was dark and cold. She could see the lights of other apartments, other lives. People who worked regular jobs and paid their bills and never dreamed of anything more. Maybe that was the smart way to live. Maybe her mother was right. She looked at the keyboard on the table. It seemed small and pathetic now. A $40 piece of junk from a pawn shop. What was she thinking? That she could compete with students who had real pianos, real teachers, real training. That she could walk into conservatory and impress anyone with her broken keyboard and her borrowed library books. The dark voice in her head was screaming now. "Give up. Stop wasting your time. Go back to your normal life. Forget about music. Forget about everything." Myra walked to the keyboard. She placed her hands on it. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold plastic under her fingers. Then she thought about her grandmother. She remembered sitting on that wooden stool in Lagos, a little girl with big dreams. She remembered her grandmother's hands, gentle and strong, guiding her fingers across the keys. She remembered the words her grandmother always said. "The world will tell you no. The world will tell you to give up. But you must not listen, Myra. You must play your music. No matter what anyone says, you must play." Myra closed her eyes. She could almost feel her grandmother beside her. She could almost smell the incense that always burned in the old house. She could almost hear the sound of the brown piano with the broken keys. Her grandmother had never become famous. She had never played in big concert halls. She had died poor, just like her mother said, but she had been happy. She had lived her life doing what she loved, and she had passed that love down to Myra. That was worth something. That was worth everything. Myra opened her eyes. The dark voice was still there, but it was quieter now. She sat down at the keyboard and placed her fingers on the keys. She took a deep breath. Then she began to play. She played for her grandmother. She played for her father. She played for the little girl in Lagos who had believed she could do anything. She played for the woman she was now, tired and scared but still fighting. The music filled the small apartment. It was not perfect. The keyboard still sounded weak and electronic, but it did not matter. What mattered was that she was playing. What mattered was that she had not given up. Myra practiced until 4 in the morning. When she finally stopped, her fingers were raw and her eyes were burning from lack of sleep. But she felt something she had not felt before. A quiet strength. A stubborn hope. Her mother did not believe in her. Maybe no one believed in her, but she believed in herself. And right now, that was enough. She had 5 weeks left. 5 weeks to prove everyone wrong. 5 weeks to turn her impossible dream into reality. She was not going to waste a single day. It was a Wednesday night at the Grand Palace Hotel. Myra stood behind the front desk, sorting through a pile of paperwork. The lobby was quiet. Most of the guests had already gone to their rooms. The night shift was always slow, which gave Myra time to think. And lately, all she could think about was music. She was humming without realizing it. A soft melody, something by Chopin. The same piece she had been practicing for weeks. Her fingers tapped lightly on the desk, moving to the rhythm in her head. She was so lost in the music that she did not notice the old woman standing in front of her. "Chopin," the woman said. Myra looked up, startled. The woman was small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore an expensive coat and carried herself with a quiet dignity. Her eyes were sharp and clear, watching Myra with unusual interest. "I am sorry," Myra said quickly. "I did not see you there. How can I help you?" The woman did not answer right away. She tilted her head to the side, still studying Myra. "That melody you were humming, it was the Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Myra blinked. "Yes, you know it." The woman smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed her whole face. "I know it very well. I have played it perhaps 10,000 times in my life." "You are a pianist?" Myra asked. "I was, a long time ago." The woman looked down at her hands. They were old hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, but Myra noticed that her fingers were long and elegant, fingers that had known the keys of a piano. "My name is Monroe," the woman said. "I am staying in room 412. I arrived this afternoon." Myra checked the computer. "Yes, Dr. Monroe, I see your reservation. Is there something I can help you with?" "Perhaps." Dr. Monroe leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I have a question for you, young lady. Why does a hotel worker know Chopin well enough to hum it perfectly?" Myra felt her face grow warm. "It is nothing, just a hobby." "A hobby?" Dr. Monroe repeated the word like she did not believe it. "I have met many people with hobbies in my life. They do not hum Chopin. They hum pop songs from the radio. Tell me the truth. Who are you?" There was something about the old woman that made Myra want to talk. Maybe it was her eyes, kind but serious. Maybe it was the way she asked the question, like she truly wanted to know the answer. Whatever it was, Myra found herself telling her story. She told Dr. Monroe about her grandmother in Lagos, about the old brown piano, about learning to play as a child. She told her about moving to America, about losing her father, about the years of working and surviving. She told her about the flyer at the community center, the audition at conservatory, the scholarship that could change everything. She told her about the $40 keyboard with the sticky keys, about the late nights of practice, about the doubt that kept her awake. When she finished, Dr. Monroe was silent for a long moment. Her face gave nothing away. "How long until the audition?" she finally asked. 4 weeks and 3 days. "And what piece are you going to play?" Myra hesitated. "I have not decided yet. I was thinking something simple, something safe. The judges said they just want to see potential. Dr. Monroe shook her head slowly. Simple and safe do not win scholarships. Tell me, what is the hardest piece you know? Myra thought about it. When I was young, my grandmother taught me the beginning of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, but I never finished learning it. It is too difficult. The G minor Ballade. Dr. Monroe's eyes lit up. One of the most beautiful pieces ever written, also one of the most difficult. It takes most pianists years to master. That is why I will not play it, Myra said. I only have 4 weeks. It is impossible. Dr. Monroe reached across the desk and took Myra's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Let me tell you something about impossible, young lady. 50 years ago, I was a black woman trying to become a concert pianist. Everyone told me it was impossible. The schools did not want me. The teachers did not want me. The concert halls did not want me. But I did not listen. I practiced until my fingers bled. I knocked on doors until someone let me in. And one day, I played at Carnegie Hall. Myra stared at her. You played at Carnegie Hall. Twice, and many other places after that. Berlin, Vienna, Tokyo. I traveled the world doing what everyone said was impossible. Dr. Monroe squeezed her hand. Do you know what I have learned in all my years? Impossible is just a word people use when they are afraid to try. Myra did not know what to say. She stood there, holding the old woman's hand, feeling something shift inside her chest. I want to hear you play, Dr. Monroe said. Come to my room tomorrow morning before your shift. I have arranged for a piano in my suite. Bring your sheet music. A piano in your hotel room. Dr. Monroe smiled again. I told you I was a concert pianist. I do not travel without proper instruments. The hotel was kind enough to arrange a baby grand for my stay. Now will you come? Myra's heart was pounding. Yes, yes, I will come. Good, 8 o'clock sharp. Do not be late. Dr. Monroe turned and walked toward the elevator. Myra watched her go, still in shock. A concert pianist. A real concert pianist. A woman who had played at Carnegie Hall, and she wanted to hear Myra play. That night Myra could not sleep at all. She sat at her keyboard and practiced until her arms ached. She went over every note, every phrase, every tiny detail. She had to be ready. She could not waste this chance. The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, Myra knocked on the door of room 412. Dr. Monroe opened it and led her inside. The room was large and beautiful, but Myra barely noticed. Her eyes went straight to the piano in the corner. It was a baby grand, black and shining, the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. She walked toward it like a person in a dream. Go ahead, Dr. Monroe said. Sit down, play. Myra sat on the bench. The seat was soft under her body. She placed her hands on the keys. They were smooth and cool, nothing like the hard plastic of her keyboard. When she pressed a key, the sound filled the room. Rich and deep and full, a real piano sound. She began to play the Chopin Nocturne. Her fingers trembled at first, nervous and unsure, but as the music flowed, something changed. The fear melted away. The room disappeared. There was only her and the piano and the music. When she finished, she turned to look at Dr. Monroe. The old woman was sitting in a chair by the window, her eyes closed. A single tear was rolling down her cheek. You have a gift, Dr. Monroe said softly, a rare and beautiful gift, but you are wasting it on safe choices. You must play the ballade. I cannot learn it in 4 weeks. You can, I will teach you. Dr. Monroe opened her eyes. Every morning before your shift you will come here. I will show you everything I know. We will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. And when you walk into that audition, you will not play something simple. You will play something extraordinary. Myra felt tears rising in her own eyes. Why? Why would you do this for me? You do not even know me. Dr. Monroe stood up and walked to the piano. She stood beside Myra and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Because 50 years ago, someone did it for me, An old teacher who saw something in a scared young girl and decided to help her. She changed my life. She made everything possible. Dr. Monroe's voice was thick with memory. Now it is my turn to do the same. Now it is my turn to pass the gift along. Myra could not speak. She could only nod, the tears flowing freely down her face. Dr. Monroe handed her a new piece of sheet music. The title at the top read, Ballade Number 1 in G minor, Op. 23. No more playing safe, Dr. Monroe said. From now on we play for greatness, we play for the future. Are you ready? Myra looked at the music. She looked at the piano. She looked at the woman who believed in her when no one else did. I am ready, she said. And she meant it with her whole heart. The day of the audition arrived like a storm. Myra woke up at 5 in the morning, her heart already beating fast. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the piano keys. She heard the music. She felt the weight of everything she had worked for. For 12 days she had trained with Dr. Monroe. Every morning from 7 until noon, they worked on the ballade. Dr. Monroe was a strict teacher. She did not accept anything less than perfect. She made Myra play the same passage over and over, 20 times, 50 times, until every note was exactly right. Music is not about playing the notes, Dr. Monroe said again and again. Anyone can play notes. Music is about telling a story. Every piece has a soul. You must find it and bring it to life. Myra listened. She learned. And slowly the ballade began to change under her fingers. It was no longer just a difficult piece of music. It became something personal, something true. It became the story of her life. Now standing in her small apartment, Myra looked at herself in the mirror. She was wearing a second-hand blazer she had bought from a thrift store for $15. Her only pair of dress shoes were old and scuffed, but she had polished them until they shined. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked simple. She looked poor. She looked like exactly what she was, a hotel worker with an impossible dream. She took a deep breath and grabbed her bag. Inside was her sheet music and a small photograph of her grandmother. She did not know why she brought the photograph. It just felt right, like bringing a piece of home with her. The subway ride to conservatory took 45 minutes. Myra sat in a corner seat, watching the city pass by outside the window. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her legs to make them stop. When she arrived at the conservatory, she understood for the first time what she was up against. The building was enormous. It was made of white stone and tall glass windows. It looked like a palace from a fairy tale. Myra stood outside for a long moment, too scared to go in. Finally, she pushed through the front doors. The lobby was even more impressive than the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings of famous musicians on the walls. Everything was clean and expensive and beautiful. Myra felt like a stain on a white tablecloth. A woman at a desk directed her to the waiting room. Myra walked down a long hallway, past practice rooms where she could hear pianos playing behind closed doors. Every step felt heavy. Every second felt like an hour. The waiting room was already full when she arrived. There were about 30 people sitting in chairs along the walls. Young people mostly. Some looked nervous. Some looked bored. Some looked like they had done this 100 times before. Myra found an empty chair in the corner and sat down. She tried to make herself small. She tried to be invisible. It did not work. The young man sitting next to her looked over. He was tall and blond, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Myra's rent. He looked at her blazer. He looked at her shoes. He looked at the worn bag sitting on her lap. "First audition?" he asked. His voice was friendly, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. "Yes," Myra said quietly. "I thought so," he smiled. "You look terrified. Do not worry. It is not as bad as it seems. The judges are actually quite nice." "That is good to know." The young man leaned closer. "So, where did you study?" Myra felt her face grow hot. "I did not go to music school." Really? His eyebrows went up. Private teachers, then? Who did you study with? I taught myself, mostly. The young man laughed. It was not a mean laugh, but it stung anyway. Self-taught, that is brave, very brave. He looked at her again, this time with something like pity in his eyes. Well, good luck. You are going to need it. He turned away and started talking to someone else. Myra sat alone, feeling smaller than ever. She looked around the room. Everyone seemed to know each other. They talked about teachers she had never heard of, competitions she did not know existed, music schools she could never afford. They belonged here. She did not. A woman with a clipboard came into the room. "Number 23, she called out. "Myra." Myra stood up. Her legs felt weak. She picked up her bag and followed the woman out of the waiting room. As she left, she heard someone whisper behind her. "Self-taught, is she serious?" The walk to the auditorium was the longest walk of Myra's life. Her heart was beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were sweating. Her mouth was dry. She wanted to run away. She wanted to hide. But she kept walking. The auditorium was bigger than she expected. There were rows and rows of empty seats, stretching back into darkness. On the stage was a single grand piano, black and shining under the lights, and at a table near the front sat 5 judges, 3 men and 2 women. They all looked tired and bored, like they had been listening to auditions all day and were ready to go home. Myra walked to the center of the stage. Her shoes made clicking sounds on the wooden floor. She felt tiny under the bright lights. She felt like an ant walking into a kingdom of giants. One of the judges looked up from his papers. He was an older man with gray hair and glasses. "Name?" he asked. "Myra." He made a mark on his paper. "And what piece will you be playing for us today, miss?" This was the moment. Myra had thought about this moment for weeks. She had practiced a safe piece, just in case. A simple nocturne that she could play perfectly, a piece that would not embarrass her. But then she thought about Dr. Monroe. She thought about all those mornings at the piano, learning the ballade note by note. She thought about her grandmother, who had always told her to be brave. She thought about everyone who had said she was not good enough, that people like her did not become musicians. "Chopin," she said. Her voice was stronger than she expected. "Ballade number 1 in G minor." The judge looked up again. This time there was interest in his eyes. "The G minor ballade, that is quite an ambitious choice for an open audition." "Yes, sir. Most candidates play something simpler. Are you sure?" Myra nodded. "I am sure." The judge exchanged a glance with the other judges. One of them shrugged. Another made a note. "Very well," the gray-haired judge said. "Whenever you are ready." Myra walked to the piano. Each step felt like a mile. She sat down on the bench and adjusted her position. She placed her hands on the keys. They were cool and smooth, just like the piano in Dr. Monroe's hotel room, just like the piano in her grandmother's house so many years ago. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She thought about everyone who had believed in her. Dr. Monroe, her grandmother, her father, even herself on those long nights practicing alone in her tiny apartment. Then she thought about everyone who had not believed in her. Her mother, the young man in the waiting room, every person who had ever told her to be realistic, to give up, to accept less. She was going to prove them all wrong. Myra opened her eyes. She looked at the keys. She looked at her hands. She looked at the judges who were watching her with tired, expectant faces. And then she began to play. The first notes of the ballade filled the auditorium like a question, soft and slow, almost hesitant. The melody rose gently, like a person waking from a long sleep. Myra's fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness that surprised even herself. The judges sat up a little. One of them put down her pen. Myra did not notice. She was not in the auditorium anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. She was in her grandmother's house in Lagos, sitting on a wooden stool, feeling the afternoon sun warm on her face. She was a little girl again, learning to play for the first time, discovering that music could be a language more powerful than words. The melody grew. It became richer, deeper, more complex. The notes tumbled over each other like water over stones. Myra's hands moved faster now, flying across the keys with a speed and precision that came from weeks of practice, from years of longing, from a lifetime of wanting this moment. She played the section that Dr. Monroe had made her practice 100 times, the difficult passage where most pianists stumbled. But Myra did not stumble. Her fingers knew the path. They had walked it so many times in the darkness of her apartment, on the sticky keys of her $40 keyboard. Now, on this beautiful piano, the music flowed like it was always meant to flow. The judges were no longer bored. The gray-haired man had removed his glasses and was leaning forward, watching Myra's hands with intense concentration. The woman beside him had stopped taking notes. She was simply listening, her mouth slightly open. But Myra saw none of this. She was in the music now, lost in it completely. She was playing the part where the melody turned dark and stormy. Her fingers crashed against the keys, filling the auditorium with thunder. The sound was huge, powerful, almost frightening. It was the sound of grief, the sound of loss, the sound of her father's funeral, of saying goodbye to everything she had ever known. Tears were forming in Myra's eyes, but she did not stop. She could not stop. The music demanded to be played. The story demanded to be told. Then the storm began to pass. The music softened, became gentle again. But it was different now. It was not the same innocence as the beginning. It was something stronger, something that had been broken and put back together, something that had survived. Myra thought about Dr. Monroe. She thought about the old woman who had seen something in a hotel worker with a broken dream. She thought about all those mornings in room 412, working on every note until it was perfect. She thought about the gift that had been passed from one generation to the next, from teacher to student, from grandmother to granddaughter. The music climbed higher. It became triumphant, joyful, full of hope. Myra was flying now. Her fingers were barely touching the keys, but the sound that came out was enormous. It filled every corner of the auditorium. It echoed off the walls and the ceiling and the empty seats. One of the judges dropped her pen. She did not pick it up. She was crying. Myra reached the final section of the ballade, the most difficult part, the part that most pianists feared. Her hands moved in ways that seemed impossible, playing notes so fast they blurred together into a river of sound. But every note was clear. Every note was intentional. Every note told a piece of the story. She thought about her mother, the phone call, the words that had hurt so much. People like us do not become musicians. We work, we survive. That is what we do. Myra put all of that pain into the music. She put all of that anger, but she also put something else. She put forgiveness, she put understanding, she put love. Because her mother had been wrong, people like them could become musicians. People like them could do anything. They just had to be brave enough to try. The music reached its peak. The final chords crashed through the auditorium like waves against a shore. Myra played them with everything she had, pouring her entire soul into the piano. Her arms ached, her fingers burned, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Not now, not when she was so close. The last note hung in the air. It was a soft note, gentle and quiet, like a whisper, like a goodbye, like a promise. Then silence. Myra sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. She was breathing hard. Her face was wet with tears. She did not know how long she had been playing. It felt like a minute. It felt like a lifetime. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The auditorium was completely still. Then Myra looked up at the judges. The gray-haired man was staring at her with an expression she could not read. His glasses were in his hand. His mouth was open. Beside him, the woman who had been crying was wiping her eyes with a tissue. Another judge was shaking his head slowly, like he could not believe what he had just heard. "That was," the gray-haired judge started to say, but he stopped. He cleared his throat. He tried again. That was not what we expected. Myra did not know what to say. I am sorry if it was too long. Too long, the judge laughed. It was a strange sound in the quiet room. My dear, that was one of the most remarkable performances I have heard in 40 years of teaching. The other judges were nodding. The crying woman spoke up. The G minor ballade is one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. Most professionals spend years learning to play it. And you made it sound like it was written just for you. Myra felt her heart stop. Thank you. Where did you study? The gray-haired judge asked. Who taught you to play like that? Myra thought about the question. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about Dr. Monroe. She thought about the YouTube videos and the library books and the late nights alone with her broken keyboard. I had many teachers, she said finally, but mostly I taught myself. The judges exchanged looks. The crying woman shook her head in disbelief. Self-taught, she murmured. Self-taught, and she plays like that. The gray-haired judge stood up from his chair. He walked around the table and approached the stage. He stopped at the edge and looked up at Myra with something like wonder in his eyes. Miss, he said, I have listened to hundreds of auditions over the years. I have heard brilliant technique. I have heard impressive speed. I have heard all the tricks that young pianists learn to impress judges like me, but I have rarely heard what I heard today. Myra held her breath. What did you hear? The judge smiled. I heard truth. I heard a story. I heard a woman who has lived and suffered and survived and who put all of that into her music. That is not something that can be taught. That is something that comes from the soul. He paused. We are not supposed to make decisions on the spot. We are supposed to deliberate, compare all the candidates, be fair and objective. He glanced back at the other judges. They were all nodding. But I think I speak for everyone when I say that we have heard enough. Myra's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. What do you mean? The gray-haired judge reached up and took her hand. His grip was warm and firm. Welcome to conservatory, miss. The scholarship is yours. For a moment, Myra could not process the words. They seemed to float in the air, meaningless sounds that her brain refused to understand. Then slowly, the meaning sank in. She had won. She had actually won. Myra did not cry. She did not scream. She just sat there at the piano, holding the judge's hand, feeling the weight of everything she had been through lift from her shoulders. The years of struggle, the doubt, the fear, the long nights of practice, all of it had led to this moment. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her the first notes on a broken piano in Lagos. She thought about her father, who had always believed she was destined for something special. She thought about Dr. Monroe, who had seen a gift in a tired hotel worker and had refused to let it go to waste. And she thought about herself, the scared girl who had almost thrown away the flyer, the desperate woman who had practiced on a $40 keyboard until her fingers bled, the dreamer who had refused to give up, even when everyone told her to. She had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, she had done it. And this was only the beginning. The video was never supposed to exist. The auditions at conservatory were private. No recordings allowed. But one of the judges had a phone in her pocket. And when Myra started playing, something made her press the record button. She did not mean to share it. She just wanted to remember. But that night, she showed the video to her husband. Her husband showed it to a friend. The friend posted it online with a simple caption, "You need to see this." By morning, the video had 10,000 views. By afternoon, it had 100,000. By the next day, 14 million people had watched Myra play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in an empty auditorium. Myra knew nothing about this. She had gone home after the audition, exhausted and happy. She had called Dr. Monroe to tell her the good news. The old woman had cried on the phone, something Myra never thought she would hear. "I knew it," Dr. Monroe said. "I knew from the first moment I heard you hum that nocturne. I knew you were special." That night, Myra slept better than she had in years, deep and dreamless and peaceful. She woke up late the next morning, feeling like a new person, like someone who had finally become who she was always meant to be. Then she looked at her phone. She had 347 missed calls. She had 2,000 text messages. She had notifications from apps she did not even know she had. Her email inbox was overflowing with messages from names she did not recognize. For a moment, she thought her phone was broken. Then she started reading the messages. "Are you the piano girl? I saw your video. I cried for an hour. Please call me. I'm a producer from CNN. This is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. You are going to be famous." Myra sat in her bed, staring at her phone, trying to understand what was happening. She opened the internet and searched her own name. The results made her drop the phone on the floor. Every major news website had a story about her. CNN, BBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They all had the same headline with small variations. Hotel worker stuns music world with once-in-a-generation performance. Myra picked up her phone with trembling hands. She clicked on one of the videos. It was her. She was sitting at the piano in the auditorium, her eyes closed, her hands moving across the keys. The video quality was not great. It was shaky and slightly blurry, but the sound was clear. The music was clear. She watched herself play for a few minutes. It was strange seeing herself from the outside. She looked different than she expected. She looked calm. She looked confident. She looked like a real musician. The comments under the video were endless. Thousands of people from all over the world saying things she never thought anyone would say about her. This made me believe in dreams again. I have never cried listening to music before, until now. She plays like she has lived 1,000 lives. This is what talent looks like. Pure, raw, unfiltered talent. Myra could not read anymore. She put the phone down and sat in silence, trying to process everything. Yesterday, she was a hotel worker with a $40 keyboard. Today, 14 million people knew her name. It did not seem real. It seemed like something from a movie, not from her life. Her phone rang. She did not recognize the number, but she answered anyway. "Miss," the voice was professional and polite. "This is the scholarship committee at conservatory. We have been trying to reach you all morning." "I am sorry, I just woke up. I did not see the calls." "That is understandable. You must be overwhelmed. We wanted to let you know that the committee met last night. Given the unusual circumstances, we have decided to expand your scholarship." Myra's heart jumped. Expanded. The original scholarship covered tuition for 1 year. We are now offering a full 4-year scholarship, covering tuition, housing, meals, and all supplies. We are also providing a monthly stipend for living expenses. The woman paused. "Several donors have come forward after seeing your video. They want to support your education. You will not have to worry about money while you study with us." Myra could not speak. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Miss, are you still there?" "Yes," Myra whispered. "I am here. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just come to the conservatory on Monday. We will take care of everything." After the call ended, Myra sat very still for a long time. She looked around her tiny apartment. The cracked walls, the old furniture, the $40 keyboard on the kitchen table. All of it was about to change. All of it was already changing. She picked up her phone again and called the Grand Palace Hotel. Her manager answered on the 3rd ring. "Myra, we have been calling you all day. There are reporters here. They want to interview you. What is going on?" "I am sorry," Myra said. "I should have called sooner. I need to tell you something. I am leaving. I am going to music school." There was a long pause. When her manager spoke again, her voice was different, softer. "I saw the video. We all did. The whole hotel watched it together in the break room." Another pause. "You were incredible, Myra, truly incredible. I had no idea." Neither did I, Myra said. Not really, not until now. That afternoon, Myra took a bus to the hotel where Dr. Monroe was staying. The old woman was in the lobby, sitting in a chair by the window, watching the snow fall outside. When she saw Myra, her face lit up with joy. There she is, Dr. Monroe said, the famous pianist, the star of the internet. Myra laughed and sat down beside her. I cannot believe it. I still cannot believe any of it. I can. Dr. Monroe took her hand. I believed it from the first day. From the first note you played on my piano, I knew the world would see what I saw. I could not have done it without you. You know that, right? You changed everything. Dr. Monroe shook her head. No, my dear, I just opened a door, you walked through it yourself. You did the work. You played the music. I just reminded you of what you already knew. They sat together for a long time, watching the snow, not needing to say anything. Two women from different generations, connected by music, by hope, by a gift that could not be contained. That evening, Myra finally called her mother. Her mother answered on the first ring. She was crying before she even said hello. I saw it, her mother said through her tears. I saw the video. Everyone in Lagos has seen it. Everyone is talking about you, the daughter of Grace playing piano like an angel in America. Mama, Myra started to say. No, let me speak, please. Her mother took a shaky breath. I was wrong, Myra. I was so wrong. I was scared for you. I did not want you to be hurt. I did not want you to fail. But I should have believed in you. I should have trusted you. Can you forgive me? Myra felt tears running down her own face. There is nothing to forgive, Mama. You were trying to protect me. I understand. I am so proud of you, so proud. Your father would be proud too, and your grandmother. Her mother's voice broke. She is probably up in heaven right now, smiling down at you. She always said you were special. She always knew. I know, Mama, I know. They talked for an hour. They laughed. They cried. They said things they should have said years ago. By the time Myra hung up, something heavy had lifted from her heart. A wound that had been open for too long was finally beginning to heal. That night, Myra sat at her keyboard one last time. She placed her fingers on the sticky keys. She played a simple melody, the same lullaby her grandmother had taught her all those years ago. The keyboard still sounded thin and weak. The keys still stuck. Nothing had changed about the instrument. But everything had changed about her. She was not a hotel worker anymore. She was not a dreamer with an impossible goal. She was a musician, a real musician, and her story was just beginning. 1 year later, Myra stood backstage at Lincoln Center in New York City. The concert hall was filled with 2,500 people. Every seat was taken. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, waiting for the performance to begin. Myra looked down at her hands. They were the same hands that had worked at a hotel front desk, the same hands that had practiced on a $40 keyboard with sticky keys, the same hands that had bled from playing too hard, too long, too desperately. Now those hands were about to play on the most famous stage in America. The past year had been like a dream. Myra had started her studies at conservatory in January. The first few months were difficult. She was surrounded by students who had been training since childhood. They knew things she had never learned. They played pieces she had never heard. Sometimes she felt like a fraud, like someone who had gotten lucky and did not belong. But she worked harder than anyone else. She was always the first one in the practice room in the morning and the last one to leave at night. She studied music theory. She learned new techniques. She listened to recordings of the great pianists and tried to understand what made them special. Her teachers were amazed by her progress. You have something rare, one of them told her. You have hunger, you have fire. Most students come here talented but lazy. You came here hungry and hard-working. That is a dangerous combination. The months passed quickly. Myra gave small concerts. She played at recitals and competitions. She won some and lost some. Each performance taught her something new. Each failure made her stronger. Each success made her more confident. And through it all, Dr. Monroe was there. The old woman had moved to New York to be closer to Myra. They had lunch together every Sunday. Dr. Monroe came to every performance, sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes. She was like a grandmother to Myra now, like family. But tonight was different. Tonight was not a small recital or a student competition. Tonight was Myra's debut concert, her first real performance as a professional musician. The tickets had sold out in 3 hours. People had traveled from all over the world to hear her play. A stage manager appeared beside Myra. 5 minutes, miss. Myra nodded. Her heart was beating fast, but she was not afraid. She had been afraid many times before, at the audition, at her first recital, at every step along the way, but fear was an old friend now. She knew how to work with it. She knew how to turn it into power. She thought about everyone who had brought her to this moment. Her grandmother, who had taught her the first notes on a broken piano in Lagos. Her father, who had believed in her even when she did not believe in herself. Dr. Monroe, who had seen a gift in a tired hotel worker and had refused to let it be wasted. Her mother, who had been wrong but had learned to believe. And she thought about herself, the scared girl who had almost thrown away the flyer, the determined woman who had practiced until her fingers bled, the dreamer who had refused to give up, no matter how many people told her to be realistic. She had come so far, she had survived so much, and now she was here, about to step onto the biggest stage of her life. The stage manager returned. "It is time." Myra took a deep breath. She smoothed down her black dress. It was simple and elegant, nothing like the second-hand blazer she had worn to the audition, but she was still the same person inside, still the same Myra. She walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was deafening. 2,500 people were on their feet, clapping and cheering before she had played a single note. Myra walked to the piano, a beautiful grand that gleamed under the spotlights. She sat down on the bench and adjusted her position. The crowd settled. The hall grew quiet. 2,500 people held their breath. Myra looked out at the audience. In the front row, she could see her mother. Grace had flown from Lagos for this night. She was wearing her best dress, the one she saved for special occasions. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. Beside her sat Dr. Monroe, old and frail but still elegant. The two women were holding hands. Myra smiled at them. Then she turned to face the piano. She thought about what she was going to play, not just the notes, not just the technique. She thought about the story of a little girl in Lagos who fell in love with music, the story of a young woman who lost her way and found it again, the story of a dreamer who refused to give up. She placed her hands on the keys. The first note rang out across the hall, clear and pure and beautiful. It hung in the air like a prayer. Then Myra began to play. She played everything. She played her grandmother's lullaby. She played her father's funeral. She played the cold nights in Chicago, working double shifts at the hotel. She played the $40 keyboard with the sticky keys. She played the doubt and the fear and the loneliness. But she also played hope. She played the moment she saw the flyer. She played the morning she met Dr. Monroe. She played the audition that changed everything. She played the millions of people who had watched her video and believed in her when she could not believe in herself. The music filled the concert hall. It rose up to the ceiling and spread out to every corner. It touched every person in the audience. Some of them cried. Some of them laughed. Some of them just sat in silence, letting the music wash over them like a wave. Myra played for an hour. She played pieces by Chopin. She played with technical perfection. But more than that, she played with heart. She played with soul. She played with everything she had. When the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. The concert hall was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the audience exploded. The applause was like thunder. People jumped to their feet. They shouted. They screamed. They clapped until their hands hurt. Some of them were crying openly. Some of them were hugging strangers. The sound went on, filling the hall with joy and admiration and love. Myra stood up from the piano. She bowed deeply, her eyes filled with tears. She looked at her mother in the front row. Grace was sobbing, her hand pressed over her heart. She looked at Dr. Monroe, who was nodding slowly, a peaceful smile on her face. The audience kept clapping. They would not stop. They called her name. They demanded more. The stage manager had to come out 3 times to tell them the concert was over. Finally, the lights came up. The crowd began to leave, talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. But Myra stayed on stage for a moment longer. She placed her hand on the piano, feeling the smooth wood under her fingers. She thought about how far she had come. From a hotel front desk to Lincoln Center. From a $40 keyboard to a grand piano. From a forgotten dream to a standing ovation. But this was not the end. This was just the beginning. There were more concerts to play, more audiences to move, more music to make, a whole lifetime of dreams waiting to come true. Myra smiled. She whispered a quiet thank you to the piano, to the music, to everyone who had believed in her. Then she walked off stage, ready for whatever came next. Outside the concert hall, her mother was waiting. They hugged for a long time, not saying anything. Words were not necessary. Dr. Monroe was there too. She looked tired but happy. "You did it," she said softly. "You really did it." "No," Myra said. "We did it, all of us together." The 3 women walked out into the New York night. The city was bright and loud and alive. The streets were full of people, all of them with their own dreams, their own struggles, their own stories. Myra looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, her grandmother was watching. Her father was watching. All the people who had loved her and believed in her were watching. She had done what they said was impossible. She had played not just for the present, but for the future. For every girl who had ever been told she was not good enough. For every dreamer who had ever been told to give up. For every person who had ever looked at a flyer on a wall and wondered if they should take a chance. Myra took a deep breath of the cold night air. She squeezed her mother's hand. She smiled at Dr. Monroe. Then she walked forward, into the city, into the night, into the beautiful, uncertain, wonderful future that was waiting for her. The story of the hotel worker who played like an angel was over. The story of Myra, the pianist who changed the world, was just beginning.